Hello all you fine, beautiful, wonderful people. I'm back here once again with another video, and today I'm going to be discussing The Dark Side of the Moon Redux by Roger Waters. Now, I know this is a little late. The last couple weeks I've been just a little bit busy, so I thought, you know what, I'll give myself some time. Really let this album sit with me. I've watched a few people talk about it, and I thought, you know what, I've given my initial reaction on this prog stream with Scott from Prog Corner. Check that out every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I thought, you know what? Let's talk about this and really delve into this. I have to say, when he first announced this idea, I was kind of like, what? Okay. And then I kind of thought about it for a bit. And the more and more I sat on it, the more I was actually kind of intrigued. I thought this was actually a really interesting idea to at least try. And the more and more came out, like I heard the Money track. I didn't think that one was very good. The Time one I thought was a little bit better. Breathe should have been the Speak to Me, Breathe should have been the first one put out because I think it's probably the best out of all of them. And it works going into this whole album. Now, looking at this from afar, I know it's going to get a lot of the Dark Side of the Moon original comparisons. Roger thinks it's not replacing Darkside. It might be just a little bit more introspective down the road, probably closer to Death, Darkside. And in that aspect, I think it works. But there's parts of this where I don't think it does. I'll be very honest. The first time I heard this album, I fell asleep listening to it. And even the second time I was listening to it, I was fighting back like the yawns and everything, and that's not a good sign for an album. But I did make it through it, and I started to listen to it, pick up. There is some really good bright spots on here. I think Speak to Me and Breathe using Free 4 from Obscure by Clouds, that was a nice touch. I think it works in this context. Parts of Time, I don't mind. There is some good stuff. Us and Them has some moments where I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And even like some of the musical stuff, like the use of an organ sounds and stuff, it works on this. I think the musicianship, it's dark, it's atmospheric. In that essence, it works kind of if you look at Roger and what he's been doing, the lockdown sessions especially. But the more and more I listen to this, the more and more like people, I've seen this posed a lot by a lot of people. Why? And I think I might have come up with the reason why. Roger Waters, like I've heard a lot of people say on at least seeing him live that his voice isn't kind of what it used to be. And I'm just speculating here. I have no idea if this is true, but it makes sense as if he does this to Darkside. So if he goes out on tour and the promoter wants him to play some of the Dark Side of the Moon material, he might not be able to do the old stuff, but he can definitely do this. And I don't know. I wonder if there's a part of that behind it. There's also the whole F you to Pink Floyd. That's right, Pink Floyd. Forget you. But to the rest of the members of the band. But I have to say, looking at this album as a whole, it's very, very musically dry. Now, I know in an interview David Gilmour did years ago, he said Roger Waters' original concept for Dark Side of the Moon was a very dry, almost John Lennon Plastic Ono Band kind of sound to it. And he said Rick had to fight to get any of their stuff put on this record. And I think time has shown that Dave and Rick were right about Darkside, is that it should have been, like, would Darkside have been remembered as well if they didn't do that? The other thing that really grates is the high moments, like an album builds and builds and builds, and your ending should be your crescendo. And I think on this album, it just falls flat. It really does. Like, I'm listening to Brain Damage and Eclipse, and I'm like, this doesn't, this is even stuff Roger sung. Like, it feels off. It really does. And the more and more I listen to it, the more I'm like, oh man, just wait for it. I know on the CD issue, you get a 13-minute bonus track. I've never bothered to actually go listen to it because the album itself is really hard to get through. But it's really hard because I think the Roger fans would really love this. I think the more Floyd fans might not. I think he chose the wrong album. I really believe. I know there was a couple songs from the final cut that were on the lockdown sessions. I kind of think that's the album he should have done this with, because I think the music is dry and could be reworked enough where it works, and I think he proved on the lockdown sessions it does. So he could take a lot of those songs, rework them. But it's just very interesting looking at this and coming at this wanting really. I actually wanted to like it. I'm like, you know what? Had this been, and I know this album has its defenders, but I'll always bring this up. Take Pink Floyd, take Roger Waters' name off it. Let's say this is Band A, and Band A put this out. Is this getting eviscerated by the community and by everybody else? Take Roger's name off it, just say Band A, and you present this to them. Would they say a lot worse and probably give a lot more of their feelings about it? Because the more and more I've heard people say it's supposed to be kind of like Darkside Moon Unplugged, this and that, and talking about Eric Clapton, how Layla kind of unplugged helped him. The difference between Eric Clapton and Roger Waters is I think Eric Clapton was still at the age where he could pull that off. And I think he had the musical, just be the chops to pull it off. It just feels like this album, it just doesn't do it for me. But anyway, that's my thoughts and opinions. I'd like to know what you guys think of this album. Am I completely off to lunch? Do you guys like it? Don't like it? Kind of in the middle? I feel like for me, I'm kind of in the middle with it. There's parts of it I do like, but then there's a lot where it's like kind of, and the whole vocally, and I did notice this with his last album too, because I had it on the background the other day. I was listening to it. And his albums vocally seem to go like this, kind of all over the place. It's very one note is what I want to say, is one note. But anyway, that's my thoughts, opinions, like I said. Anyway, I have to say to you guys, thank you so much for watching. Tell me what you think of the album down below. This is me here signing out. Peace.